we use ChatGPT to determine that you're being mean to Israel and you need to stop.
We found a use case for AI, which is doing PR for Israel.
I would hope that no one would have to use an AI to work out that I'm being mean to Israel. But, if people want to duplicate their labor.
This is someone who also has been complaining to the BBC's guy, Trevor Asserson. He's been complaining to the BBC for years. He has his own law firm.
One guy?
Well, he owns a law firm.
Okay.
He runs a law firm that's based in London and Tel Aviv. And, he loves complaining about the BBC. He's been doing it for decades. And so he says, the Asserson report analyzed the BBC's coverage during the 4-month period beginning October 7th. A team of 20 lawyers and 20 data scientists contributed to the research, which used AI to analyze 9 million words of BBC output, identifying 1,553 breaches of editorial guidelines regarding impartiality, accuracy, etc., etc. Yeah. And so what this basically means is that they put a bunch of articles through ChatGPT and they said, hey, how many times is the term war crime used regarding Israel rather than Hamas? How many times is the term genocide used in regards to Israel versus Hamas?
Do they consider that this might correlate to the number of war crimes committed by each?
Yeah. No.
Okay.
No, not at all. It's because actually, if you paid attention to the facts, then you would know that nothing the IDF has done is a war crime.
What you saw were a bunch of TikToks that got out of hand.
Yeah.
Also men's mental health. That seems to be a go-to case where it's they're doing it as a trauma response.
I'm generally sympathetic to men's mental health, including wearing women's clothing, but I don't think that you have to do it from people that you've killed.
The data analysis team conducted an experiment to analyze the convoluted and ambiguous language. So basically, they took all the BBC web articles within the reporting time frame and asked ChatGPT 4, so they didn't use the free version 3.5, if either Israeli or Palestinian casualties are mentioned in the article, and if so, how many?
Do you think that might correlate to the number of casualties?
Well, I guess in order to be impartial in terms of an even-handed discussion as though everyone was suffering as much as everyone else, you would need to assume that each Israeli life is worth hundreds, if not thousands, of Palestinian lives, which is, again, that is sort of what they're asking. I think that's what they're asking the BBC to please replicate is, hey, we're worth more than them. Can you please be reflected in the BBC's output? And then they would say, in parallel, they used expert readers who were assigned the task of finding the real numbers mentioned in each side. And then basically they would find the discrepancy between the two methods.
Real numbers? What the fuck does real numbers mean? What source do they apply to that?
What the IDF said, I imagine.
So lastly, they measured the discrepancy. So they used ChatGPT 4 for 3 reasons. First, it is unbiased.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
great
sure,
start.
Why not? It's an unbiased proxy for the casual everyday audience for news that does not have an opinion on the conflict. So it's ChatGPT, it's completely unbiased. It's just been trained on everything that's ever been written. That's unbiased.
Yeah, of course, none of that could ever have been biased. And if it was, it averages out.
Yeah.
It couldn't be, though, there is systematic bias that is just here in sheer weight of text. Secondly, it is unaware of the purpose of the experiment at hand.
That's how a computer works, yeah.
Yeah, we could trust this calculator because it doesn't know I'm using it to try to write boobs. Finally, and most importantly, ChatGPT reads the text as given without drawing implicit conclusions. No, it fucking doesn't.
All of these things could just as well apply to a Fisher-Price toy abacus.
Thus, the numbers it extracts from the text reflect a proxy for the casualty numbers that are reported in a straightforward manner or face value. But they also look at word use. So, for example, the way a casualty is described can evoke a range of emotions, including building positive emotions such as compassion, empathy, or sympathy by using descriptive or familial words such as mother, young child, or elderly grandfather.
But that's a factual detail too.
Well, the facts are biased against Israel. All these facts are very biased against Israel.
Sure. Instead of grandmother, you should have used the word terrorist, I suppose.
Essentially, yeah, more or less. It's you should have used grand militant.
Yeah.
Does it flag terrorist as a similarly biased term in the report?
So building negative emotions such as anger and resentment can be used through descriptive words such as soldier or attacker due to the intentional active involvement of a conflict, or a casualty as an act of a soldier or attacker. So basically, if you describe a soldier as killing an elderly grandmother, that's biased against the country that sent the soldier, because the soldier is also someone's child.
What you mean is that a son and brother killed as Hamas associated grand militant.
Yeah, I mean, actually, what they want is to say that every IDF soldier is in fact a remarkable young man.
Essentially.
Yeah, kind of.
They sought to use ChatGPT to see if such descriptions by the BBC were more used to describe the deaths of Palestinians or Israelis, indicating a potential indication of bias. Genuinely, they were like, yeah, if you say that all these soldiers killed all these grandmothers, you're being biased. And we use an AI to tell us that.
This is such an exercise in futility too, because anyone who cares to pay the smallest amount of attention, it's immediately obvious what's happening and who's doing what to whom. And to then go in with your, as I say, your Fisher-Price toy abacus and count which side gets the mean words is just like, who is this for? Who is going to be convinced by this? It's just this attempt to like AI generate another kind of, smear to throw at the BBC.
Also, I don't doubt the cynicality of this, of the original, creator of this report. Obviously, it's incredibly cynical, but also it smacks of like the perception that I think Americans, when polled, I think a lot of them believe that Israelis and Palestinians in this war have been killed in equal measure, when in fact, after October 7th, one side has like absolutely had far more casualties applied to it, even by, whatever source you're going by. But if you, I guess, complain to the BBC about how many times they're mentioning Palestinian casualties, then you can plant that seed of distrust. Like, why aren't you talking about, these Israelis who are getting killed?
I see this as part of a much longer campaign by like various pressure groups, not just like the pro-Israel groups, but like anybody on the right, to essentially constantly create internal crises at the BBC where it asks itself if it's too left-wing.
Just looking, like grabbing yourself by the lapels in the mirror and being like, am I a secret woke?
Essentially, that's the idea, is to manufacture a crisis, so that the BBC will be forced to like introspect and then decide to create, and we'll talk about what they want at the end, but like I'll go back to what they were talking about. The other thing they did is they like in the reporting time frame, they looked at like every TV interview, and then they were like, you interrupted Elon Levy 11 times.
Fuck off.
Yeah, you can scroll to the point. They were like, they had a whole part that was like, oh yes, Elon Levy, pro-Israel.
They've literally transcribed part of an interview with him where they've gone like, that's a mean question.
Yes, essentially. They say, hostile opening question. Plays video of South Africa lawyer at ICC who claimed Israel committing genocide. Her opening question is just, all of that is true, isn't it?
I guess it's assumptive in the sense that what she's talking about is indeed true. I guess she didn't give him the benefit of the doubt just by asking, like, can you respond to this? I don't even know. Like, this is just what a reporter does to anyone.
It's nothing.
And it's Elon Levy.
Elon Levy is not a likable man in like any respect. Have you seen him speak? This man is PR poison.
If we're counting number of interruptions and stuff, like people talk differently. Some people like talk over an interviewer. Like it's nonsense to try and like draw much from this, Like you'll notice that like even during the like depths of the Corbyn years, right? When we were looking at a transparently unfair media, the shit we were teasing out about that was not like they asked him a slightly unfair question. It was stuff like, they photoshopped him into like a Russian hat kind of thing. When the media is really determined to put its thumb on the scale, you don't have to look that hard.
They'd say, you didn't interrupt the pro-Palestinian person quite so often. Yeah, so it's okay, you've been rude to Elon Levy. They also talked about like the themes, and some of the themes could be something like respect for Hamas, and that's cashed out as, you said that their operation was like competent, but that means that you respect Hamas, essentially, as opposed to what we want you to say, which is these people are terrifying, but are also inept. They deserve both fear and derision, you could say. But the other theme is they'd be like, Palestinian suffering is mentioned far more frequently than Israeli suffering.
Because there's far more of it. I'm not doing like fucking Amit the Devourer weighing this shit up. You can measure the number of dead bodies. It's not like a sort of like a...
You don't need a woke abacus for that.
Yeah. And they say, you haven't mentioned this did like economic damage to Israel.
It's self-inflicted. They're doing it themselves. What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, I'm sorry you decided to build your entire economy on like soda streams and spyware, but like at what point is that my fault,
But is that the argument that just like the self-inflicted economic damage that Israel has done to itself by deciding to like do a war on 7 fronts and is still sort of hemorrhaging money?
They listened to that song Seven Nation Army and got really hyped up and like got a bit too into it.
That's right. That's probably the best explanation. But like, this is self-inflicted. And like, again, I don't want to be one of those sort of like a hack that is like, oh, well, when the Russians did it. But like, yeah, when it happened in Russia and like the news of like, oh, like the Russian economy is kind of like on the brink of collapse or sort of like not in a particularly good place because it has basically decided to continue a war that is like economically damaging and demographically damaging. Like, this was sort of presented at the very least as being like a fairly neutral observation.
Yeah, it's like, when will Putin run out of road now that he's had to nationalize McDonald's or whatever?
Right. But it was also very much like, well, this is Putin's fault. That, you know, he's sort of mobilized the country to sort of be a war economy and using and kind of a lot of young men are dying in the process. But in the case of Israel, where like basically the same thing is happening. So is the argument, the point was the argument that like, well, actually Hamas are doing the damage and therefore that's how it should be framed?
Hamas's most devious attack yet on SodaStream sales.